Black Adja also claimed that the same documents proved King Andrik, the Dragon Reborn. The group of women whom Amathera used to meet in secrets were friends Andrik despised, and the shocking discovery that she financed several smuggling craft led nowhere. Almost every noble but the king himself had a finger in smuggling. Every trail ended that way. The worst Tom could discover was that Amathera had convinced two handsome young lords that each was the true love of her life, and Andrik only a means to an end. On the other hand, she had given audiences in the Panarch's palace to various lords, both alone and in company with various women recognizable as Liandrin and others on the list, and reportedly asked and accepted their advice for her decisions. Ally or captain?
Hey James Money, how you doing?
Back a good 3 hours after sunset, spinning
Hope
the
you're doing well.
staff of ridged wood and muttering about some pale-haired fellow who had tried to rob him. Tom and Domon were already slumped disconsolately at the table with Egyanin. This will be Falma again, Domon growled at the air. The stout cudgel he had acquired somewhere lay in front of him, and he wore a short sword at his belt now. Aes Sedai, the Black Adja, meddling with the Panarch. If we do no find something tomorrow, I do mean to take myself out of Tanchico. The next day for certain, if my own sister do ask me to stay. Tomorrow, Tom said wearily, elbows on the table and chin on fists. I am too tired to think straight any longer. I found myself listening to a laundryman from the Panarch's palace who claims he has heard Amathera singing bawdy songs, the sort you hear in the roughest taverns on the docks. I actually listened to him. For me, Julian said, reversing a chair to straddle it, I mean to look on tonight. I found a roofman who says the woman he keeps company with was another of Amathera's tirewomen. According to him, Amathera discharged all of her tirewomen without warning the same evening she was invested Panarch. He will take me to talk with her after he finishes some business of his own at a merchant's house. Nynaeve moved to the end of the table, fists on hips. You will not be going anywhere tonight, Julian. The three of you will be taking turns guarding our door. The men protested volubly, of course, all together. I do have my own trade to keep up, and if I must spend my days asking questions for you... Mr. Selmira, this woman is the first person I have found who's actually seen Amathera since she was raised. Nynaeve, I'll hardly be able to find a ruler tomorrow, much less trace it if I spend the night playing it. He let them argue themselves out. When they began to trail off, obviously thinking her convinced, she said, Since we have nowhere else to keep the Shan-Chan woman, she will have to sleep with us. Elaine, will you ask Rendra to have a pallet made up? On the floor will do nicely. Egyanin glanced at her, but said nothing. The men were neatly boxed. Either they refused flatly and openly broke their word to do as Nynaeve said, or else argued on, sounding as if they were whining. They glowered and spluttered, and acquiesced. Rendra was clearly surprised they requested only a pallet, but accepted the tale that Egyanin feared to risk the streets at night. She did look miffed when Tom seated himself in the hall beside their door. Those fellows, they did not get inside, however hard they tried. I told you the soup kitchen would take them away, yes? Guests at the Three Plum Court have no need for the bodyguards on their rooms. I am sure not, Elaine told her, gently trying to push her out with the door. It's just that Tom and the others do worry so. You know how men are. Tom shot her a hawkish stare beneath those thick white eyebrows, but Rendra sniffed, agreeing that she did indeed know, and let Elaine shut the door. Nynaeve immediately turned to Egyanin, who was spreading her pallet on the far side of the bed. Take off your clothes, Shan-Chan. I want to be sure you don't have another knife hidden away. Egyanin calmly stood and undressed down to her linen shift. Nynaeve searched through her dress thoroughly, then insisted on searching Egyanin as well, and none too gently. Finding nothing did not seem to soothe her. Hands behind your back, Shan-Chan. Elaine, bind her. Nynaeve, I don't think she'd bind her with the power, Elaine, Nynaeve said roughly, or I'll cut strips from her dress and bind her hands and heels. You remember how she handled those fellows in the street? Probably her own hirelings. She could probably kill us in our sleep with her bare hands. Really, Nynaeve? With Tom outside? She's Seanchan. Seanchan! She sounded as if she hated the dark-haired woman for a personal wrong, which made no sense. Egwene had been in their hands, but not Nynaeve. The set of her jaw said she meant to have her way, with the power or with ropes if she could find them. Ghianin had already placed her wrists together in the small of her back, compliant, if not neat. Elaine wove a flow of air around them and tied it off. At least it would be more comfortable than bindings cut out of her dress. Ghianin flexed her arms slightly, testing the bonds she could not see, and shivered. She could as easily have broken steel chains. Shrugging, she laid herself down awkwardly on the pallet and turned her back to them. Nynaeve began undoing her own dress. Let me have the ring, Elaine. Are you sure, Nynaeve? She looked at Ghianin in a significant manner. The woman seemed to be paying no attention to them. She'll not go running to betray us tonight. Pausing to pull the dress over her head, Nynaeve sat on the edge of the bed in her thin silk Tarabonner shift to roll down her stockings. Tonight is the agreed night. Egwene will expect one of us, and it is my turn. She will be worried if neither of us appears. Elaine fished the leather cord around her neck out of the bosom of her dress. The stone ring, all flecks and stripes in blue and brown and red, lay snuggled against the golden serpent eating its own tail. Unknotting the string long enough to hand the ter'angreal to Nynaeve, she retied and replaced it. Nynaeve strung the stone ter'angreal with her own great serpent ring and Lan's heavy gold ring, let them hang between her breasts. Give me an hour after you are certain I'm asleep, she said, stretching out atop the blue coverlet. It should take no longer than that. And keep an eye on her. Can she do bound, Nynaeve? Elaine hesitated before adding, I don't think she would try to harm us if she were loose. Don't you dare. Nynaeve raised her head to glare at Ghianin's back, then lay back on the pillows again. An hour, Elaine. Closing her eyes, she wriggled to make herself more comfortable. That should be more than enough, she murmured. Hiding a yawn behind her hand, Elaine brought the low stool to the foot of the bed, where she could watch Nynaeve, and Ghianin too, though that hardly seemed necessary. The woman lay huddled on her pallet with her knees up, hands securely fastened. It had been a strangely tiring day, considering that they had never left the inn. Nynaeve was already muttering softly in her sleep, with her elbows jutting out. Ghianin lifted her head and looked over her shoulder. She hates me, I think. Go to sleep. Elaine stifled another yawn. You do not. Don't be too sure of yourself, she said firmly. You are taking this very calmly. How can you be so calm? Calm? The other woman's hands moved involuntarily, twisting at her air-woven bonds. I am so terrified I could weep. She did not sound it, yet it sounded the simple truth. We won't harm you, Ghianin. Whatever Nynaeve wanted, she would see to that. Go to sleep. After a moment, Ghianin's head lowered. An hour. It was right not to worry Egwene needlessly, but she wished that hour could be spent on their problem instead of wandering uselessly in Tel Riyadh. If they could not find out whether Amathera was prisoner or captive, set that aside, I won't puzzle it out here. Once they did find out, how could they get inside the palace with all those soldiers about, and the civil watch, not to mention Liandrin and the others? Nynaeve had started snoring softly, a habit she denied even more heatedly than she did flinging her elbows about. Ghianin appeared to be taking the long, slow breaths of deep sleep. Yawning into the back of her hand, Elaine shifted on the hard wooden seat and began planning how to sneak into the Panarch's palace. Chapter 52. Need. For a moment, Nynaeve stood in the heart of the stone, not seeing it, not thinking of Tel Riyadh at all. Egyanin was Seanchan, one of those vile people who had put a collar on Egwene's neck and tried to put one on hers. Knowing it still made her feel hollow. Seanchan, and she had snaked her way into Nynaeve's affections. True friends had seemed so few and far between since leaving Emond's Field. To find a new one, then lose her in this way. I hate her for that, worst of all, she growled, folding her arms tightly. She made me like her, and I cannot stop, and I hate her for it. Said aloud, it made no sense at all. I do not have to make sense. She laughed quietly with a rueful shake of her head. I am supposed to be Aes Sedai, but not to be wool-gathering like a fool girl. Kalandor sparkled, the crystal sword rising out of the floor stones beneath the great dome, and the massive red stone columns ran off in shadowed rows through that odd dim light that came from everywhere. Easy to remember the feel of being watched, to imagine it again. If it had been imagination before, if it was now, anything might be hiding back in there. A good stout stick appeared in her hands as she peered among the columns. Where was Egwene? Just like the girl to keep her waiting. All that murkiness. For all she knew, something could be about to jump out at... That is an odd dress, Nynaeve. Stifling a yelp, she spun around heavily, rattling metallically, heart thumping in her throat. Egwene stood on the other side of Kalandor with two women in bulky skirts and dark shawls over white blouses, snowy hair held by folded scarves falling to their waists. Nynaeve swallowed, hoping none of them noticed, tried to make herself breathe normally again, sneaking up on her that way. One of the Aiel women she knew from Elaine's description. Anice's face was much too young for such hair, but apparently it had been almost silver even as a child. The other, thin and bony, had pale blue eyes and a leathery wrinkled face. That must be Bear. The tougher of the two, in Nynaeve's opinion, now that she saw them. Not that this Anice looked very odd dress. I rattled. Staring down at herself, she gasped. Her dress looked vaguely like a Two Rivers garment, if Two Rivers women wore dresses fashioned from steel mail, with pieces of plate armor like those she had seen in Shinar. How did men run about and jump into saddles in these things? It dragged at her shoulders as if it weighed 100 pounds. The good stick was metal now, and spiked at the end like a shiny steel sand burr. Without touching her head, she knew she had on some sort of helmet. Blushing furiously, she concentrated, changed it all to good Two Rivers woolens and a walking staff. It felt good to have her hair back in one proper braid, hanging over her shoulder. Uncontrolled thoughts are troublesome when you walk the dream, Bear said in a thin, strong voice. You must learn to control them if you mean to continue. I can control my thoughts very well, thank you, Nynaeve said crisply. Bear's voice was not all that was thin. The two wise ones seemed misty almost, and Egwene in a pale blue riding dress was very nearly transparent. What's the matter with you? Why do you look that way? Try entering Tel Riyadh while half asleep in a saddle, Egwene said dryly. She seemed to flicker. It is morning in the Threefold Land, and we are on the move. I had to talk Amice into letting me come at all, but I was afraid you would be worried. It is a difficult enough task without the horse, Amice said, sleeping shallowly when you wish to be awake. Egwene has not learned it entirely yet. I will, Egwene said with an irritated determination. She was always too hasty and stubborn in her desire to learn. If these wise ones did not hold on to the scruff of her neck, she would very likely jump into all sorts of trouble. Nynaeve stopped worrying about Egwene and trouble as the younger woman began to speak of Trollocs and Dragkar attacking Coldrock's Hold. Siana, a wise one dreamwalker among the dead, ran, hurrying the Tar Dad Aiel toward this Alcair Dal, apparently in violation of all custom, sending out runners to bring more septs. The boy was confiding his intentions to no one. The Aiel were jumpy, and Moiraine was ready to bite the heads off Nails. Moiraine's frustration would have been some relief. She had hoped he could escape that woman's influence somehow, if Egwene had not frowned so luridly. "I don't know whether it is madness or design," Egwene finished. "I could almost bear it either way if I knew. Nynaeve, I'll admit it isn't prophecy or Tarmon Gaiden that makes me anxious right now. Maybe it is foolish, but I promised Elaine to look after him, and I do not know how." Nynaeve walked around the crystal sword to put an arm around her. At least she felt solid, even if she did look a reflection in a foggy mirror. Rand sanity. There was nothing she could do about that. No comfort she could offer. Egwene was the one there to see him. The best you can do for Elaine is to tell him to read what she wrote. She worries about it sometimes. She won't talk, but I think she's afraid she said more than she should have. If he believes she is totally besotted, he's more likely to feel the same, which will not hurt her in the least. At least we have some good news in Tanchico. Some. When she explained, though, it barely seemed to justify some. "So you still don't know what it is they're after," Egwene said after she finished. "But even if you did, they are on top of it and still might find it first." "Not if I can help it." Nynaeve fixed the two wise ones with a firm, level look. From what Elaine said of Arnis's reluctance to give anything but warnings, she would need firmness to deal with them. The pair was so hazy a strong puff might blow them away like fog. "Elaine thinks you know all sorts of tricks with dreams. Is there any way I could get into Amathera's dreams to see if she is a dark friend?" "Foolish girl." Bear's long hair swung as she shook her head. "If I, Sedai, a foolish girl still. To step into another's dreams is very dangerous unless she knows you and expects you. It is her dream, not as here. There, this Amathera will control all, even you." She had been sure that was the way. It was irritating to learn differently. And foolish girl? "I am not a girl," she snapped. She wanted to yank her braid, but clenched her fist at her side instead. For some reason, pulling at her hair felt strangely uncomfortable of late. "I was wisdom of Emond's Field before I became Aes Sedai." She hardly stumbled over the lie at all now. "And I told women as old as you when to sit down and be quiet. If you know how to help me, say so instead of giving me foolish maunderings about what is dangerous. I know danger when I see it." Abruptly, she realized her single braid had split in two, one over each ear, red ribbons woven through to make tassels on the ends. Her skirt was so short it showed her knees. She wore a loose white blouse like the wise ones, and her shoes and stockings were gone. Where had this come from? She'd surely never thought of wearing anything like it. Egwene put a hasty hand over her mouth. Was she aghast? Surely not smiling. "Uncontrolled thoughts," Arnis said, "can be very troublesome indeed, Nynaeve Sedai, until you learn." Despite her bland tone, her lips quirked in barely masked amusement. Nynaeve kept her face smooth with an effort. They could not have had anything to do with it. They can't have. She struggled to change back, and it was a struggle, as though something held her as she was. Her cheeks grew hotter and hotter. Suddenly, just at the point when she was ready to break down and ask advice or even help, her clothes and hair were as they had been. She wiggled her toes gratefully in good stout shoes. It had just been some odd stray thought. In any case, she was not about to voice any suspicions. They looked far too amused as it was, even Egwene. "I am not here for some fool contest. I just won't dignify them. If I cannot enter her dream, can I bring her into the world of dreams? I need some way to talk to her." "We would not teach you that if we knew how," Arnis said, hitching her shawl angrily. "It is an evil thing you ask, Nynaeve Sedai. She would be as helpless here as you in her dream." Bear's thin voice sounded like an iron rod. "It has been handed down among dreamwalkers since the first that no one must ever be brought into the dream. It is said that that was the way of the shadow in the last days of the Age of Legends." Nynaeve shifted her feet under those hard stares. Realizing she had an arm around Egwene, she held still. She was not about to let Egwene think they had made her uneasy. Not that they had. If she thought of being hauled before the women's circle before she was chosen wisdom, it was nothing at all to do with the wise ones. Firmness was what was... They stared at her. Hazy or not, these women could duel Swan Sanche stare for stare. Especially Bear. Not that they intimidated her, but she could see the point of being reasonable. Elaine and I need help. The Black Ajah is sitting on top of something that can harm Rand. If they find it before we do, they may be able to control him. We need to find it first. If there is anything you can do to help, anything you can tell me, anything at all. Aes Sedai, Anise said. You can make a request for help sound a demand. Nynaeve's mouth tightened. Demand? She had all but begged. Demand, indeed? But the Aiel woman did not seem to notice, or chose to ignore it. Yet a danger to Rand al'Thor. We cannot allow the Shadow to have that. There is a way. Dangerous? Bear shook her head vigorously. This young woman knows less than Egwene did when she came to us. It is too dangerous for her. Then maybe I could... Egwene began, and the two cut her off as one. You are going to complete your training. You are too eager to go beyond what you know, Bear said sharply. At the same time, Anise said, not the slightest bit softer, you are not there in Tanchico. You do not know the place, and you cannot have Nynaeve's need. She is the hunter. Under those iron eyes, Egwene subsided sulkily, and the two wise ones looked at each other. Finally, Bear shrugged and lifted her shawl up around her face. Clearly, she washed her hands of the entire matter. It is dangerous, Anise said. They made it sound as if breathing was dangerous in Tel'aran'rhiod. Nynaeve cut off, as Anise's eyes actually grew harder. She would not have thought it possible. Keeping a firm image of her clothes as they were, of course they'd had nothing to do with that. It simply seemed wise to make sure her dress remained as it was. She changed what she had been going to say. I will be careful. Is not possible, Anise told her flatly. But I do not know another way. Need is the key. When there are too many people for the hold, the sept must divide, and the need is for water at the new hold. If no location with water is known, one of us may be called to find one. The key then is the need for a proper valley or canyon not too far from the first with water. Concentrating on that need will bring you nearer to what you want. Concentrating on the need again will bring you closer. Each step brings you nearer, until at last you are not only in the valley, but standing beside where water is to be found. It may be harder for you because you do not know exactly what you are seeking, though the depth of need may make up for it, and you know already in a rough fashion where it lies in this palace. The danger is this, and you must be aware of it. The wise one leaned toward her intently, driving her words home with a tone as sharp as her gaze. Each step is made blind, with eyes closed. You cannot know where you will be when you open your eyes. And finding the water does no good if you are standing in a den of vipers. The fangs of a mountain king kill as quickly in the dream as waking. I think these women Egwene speaks of will kill more quickly than the snake. I did that, Egwene exclaimed. Nynaeve felt her jump as the Aiel women's eyes went to her. Before I met you, she said hastily. Before we went to Tyr. Need. Nynaeve felt warmer toward the Aiel women now that one of them had given her something she could use. You must keep a close eye on Egwene, she told them, hugging the younger woman to show she meant it fondly. You are right, Bear. She will try to do more than she knows how. She has always been that way. For some reason, Bear arched a white eyebrow at her. I do not find her so, Anise said in a dry voice. She is a biddable student now. Is that not so, Egwene? Egwene's mouth set in a stubborn line. These wise ones did not know her well if they believed a Two Rivers woman would call herself biddable. On the other hand, she did not say anything. That was unexpected. As hard a lot as Aes Sedai, it appeared, these Aiel women. Her hour was slipping away, and impatience bubbled to try this method now. If Elaine woke her, it might take hours to get back to sleep. "In 7 days," she said, "one of us will meet you here again." Egwene nodded. "In 7 days, Rand will have shown himself to the clan chiefs as he who comes with the dawn, and the Aiel will all be behind him." The wise one's eyes shifted slightly, and Amis adjusted her shawl. Egwene did not see it. "The Light knows what he means to do then." "In 7 days," Nynaeve said, "Elaine and I will have taken whatever Liandrin is hunting away from the lot of them. Or else, very likely, the Black Ajah would have it." So the wise ones were not more certain the Aiel would follow Rand than Egwene was of his plans. No certainty anywhere, but no point in burdening Egwene with more doubts either. "When one of us sees you next, we'll have laid them by the heels and stuffed them all in sacks to cart to the tower for trial. Try to be careful, Nynaeve. I know you don't know how to, but try anyway. Tell Elaine I said so too. She isn't as bold as you are, but she can come close." Amis and Bear each laid a hand on Egwene's shoulder, and they were gone. Try to be careful? Fool girl, she was always careful. What had Egwene been about to say, rather than bold? Nynaeve folded her arms tightly in lieu of pulling her braid. Maybe better she did not know. She realized she had not told Egwene about Egyanin. Perhaps best not to stir up Egwene's memories of her captivity. Nynaeve could remember all too well the other woman's nightmares for weeks after she was freed, waking up screaming that she would not be chained. Much the best to let it lie. It was not as if Egwene need ever meet the Seanchan woman. Burn that woman. Burn Egyanin to ash. Burn her. "This is not using my time wisely," she said aloud. The words echoed through the tall columns. With the other women gone, they looked even more foreboding than before, more a hiding place for unseen watchers and things that jumped out at you. Time to be away. First, though, she changed her hair to a tassel of long, narrow braids, her dress to clinging folds of dark green silk. A transparent veil covered her mouth and nose, fluttering slightly when she breathed. With a grimace, she added beads of green jade woven into the thin plaits. Should any of the Black Sisters be using their stolen ter'angreal to enter the world of dreams and see her in the Panarch's palace, they would think her only a Tarabonner woman who had dreamed herself there in more ordinary fashion. Some knew her by sight, though. Lifting a handful of bead-strung braids, she smiled. Pale honey. She had not realized that was possible. I wonder what I look like. Could they still know me? Suddenly, a tall stand mirror stood beside Kalendor. In the glass, her big brown eyes widened in shock. Her rosebud of a mouth fell open. She had Rendra's face. Her features flickered back and forth, eyes and hair flashing darker then lighter. Straining, she settled them as the innkeeper's. No one would know her now, and Egwene thought she did not know how to be careful. Closing her eyes, she concentrated on Tanchico, on the Panarch's palace, on Need. Something dangerous to Rand, to the Dragon Reborn. Need. Around her, Tel Riyadh shifted. She felt it, a sliding lurch, and opened her eyes eagerly to see what she had found. It was a bedchamber, as big as any 6 at the Three-Plum Court, the white plaster walls worked in painted friezes, golden lamps hanging from the ceiling by gilded chains. The tall posts of the beds spread carved limbs and leaves in a canopy above the mattresses. A woman well short of her middle years stood stiffly with her back to one of the posts at the foot of the bed. She was really quite lovely, in that pouty-mouthed way that Nynaeve herself had adopted. Atop her dark braids sat a crown of golden trefoil leaves among rubies and pearls, with a moonstone larger than a goose egg. and around her neck hung a broad stole, dangling to her knees and embroidered along its length with frieze. Aside from crown and stole, she wore only a glistening coat of sweat. Her tremulous eyes were fixed on the woman lying at her ease on a low couch. The second woman's back was to Nynaeve, as misty as Egwene had been earlier. She was short and slight, dark hair flowing loose to her shoulders, wide-skirted gown of pale yellow silk, definitely not Tarrabona. Nynaeve did not have to see her face to know it had large blue eyes and a fox-like shape, or see the bonds of air holding the woman against the bedpost to know she was looking at Tamael Kinderoda. Learn so much when you use your dreams instead of wasting sleep, Tamael was saying with a Kyrianan accent, laughing. Are you not enjoying yourself? What shall I teach you next? I know. I have loved 1,000 sailor men. She waggled an admonishing finger.
Be right back.
Be sure you learn all the words properly, Amathera. You know I would not want to... What are you gaping at? Abruptly, Nynaeve realized the woman against the bedpost, Amathera, the panel, was staring straight at her. Tamael shifted lazily as though to turn her head. Nynaeve clamped her eyes shut. Need. Shift. Letting herself sag against the narrow column, Nynaeve gulped air as if she had run 20 miles, not even wondering where she was. Her heart pounded like a wild drum. Speak of landing in a viper's den. Tamael Kinderoda, the Black Sister Amiko had said enjoyed causing pain, enjoyed it enough to have made one of the Black Ajah comment, and her not able to channel a spark. She could have ended up decorating a bedpost beside Amathera. Light. She shivered, seeing it. Calm yourself, woman. You are out of there. And even if Tamael saw you, she saw a honey-haired woman who vanished, just a Tarrabona who dreamed herself into Temirunriad for a moment. Surely Tamael could not have been aware of her long enough to sense she could channel. Even when she could not do it, the ability was there to be felt by one who shared it. Only a moment. Not long enough, with luck. At least she knew Amathera's situation now. The woman was certainly no ally of Tamael. This method of searching had already repaid use, but not enough. Not yet. Controlling her breathing as best she could, she looked around. Rows of the thin white columns ran the length and breadth of a huge chamber, nearly as wide as it was long, with smooth polished white floor stones below and gilded bosses on the ceiling high above. A thick rope of white silk ran all the way around the room on waist-high posts of dark polished wood, except where it would have blocked the doorways with double-pointed arches. Stands and open cabinets lined the walls, and the bones of peculiar beasts with more display cases out on the floor also roped off. The main exhibition hall of the palace, from Egwene's description. What she sought must be in this very chamber. Her next step would not be as blind as the first. There were certainly no vipers, no Tamaels here. A handsome woman suddenly appeared beside a glass case with 4 carved legs out in the middle of the floor. She was no Tarrabona, with her dark hair falling in waves to her shoulders, yet that was not what made Nynaeve gape. The woman's dress seemed to be mist, sometimes silvery and opaque, sometimes gray and so thin as to show her limbs and body clearly. From wherever she had dreamed herself here, she assuredly had a vivid imagination to conceive that. Even the scandalous Damani dresses she had heard of surely could not equal this. The woman smiled at the glass case, then continued on up the hall, stopping on the far side to study something Nynaeve could not make out. Something dark atop a white stone stand. Frowning, Nynaeve released her grip on a fistful of honey-colored braids. The woman would disappear at any moment. Few dreamed themselves into Temirunriad for long. Of course, it did not matter if the woman saw her. She was certainly no one on their list of Black Sisters. And yet she seemed somehow... Nynaeve realized she had taken hold of a handful of braids again. The woman, of its own accord, her hand pulled, hard, and she stared at it in amazement. Her knuckles were white, her hand quivering. It was almost as if thinking of that woman, arm shaking, her hand tried to yank her hair out of her scalp. Why under the light? Mist-clad woman still stood in front of the distant white pedestal. Trembling spread from Nynaeve's arm into her shoulder. She had certainly never seen the woman before, and yet she tried to open her fingers. They only clamped down hard. Surely she never had. Shivering from head to toe, she hugged herself with the one arm she had free. Surely her teeth wanted to chatter. The woman seemed she wanted to weep. The woman... Images burst into her head, exploding. She slumped against the column beside her as if they had physical force. Her eyes bulged. She saw it again. The chamber of falling blossoms, and that sturdily handsome woman surrounded by the glow of Saidar. Herself and Elaine babbling like children, fighting to be first to answer, pouring out everything they knew. How much had they told? It was difficult to bring out details, but she dimly remembered keeping some things back. Not because she wanted to. She would have told the woman anything, done anything she asked. Her face heated with shame and anger. If she had managed to hide any scraps, it was only because she had been so eager to answer the last question asked that she passed over earlier. It makes no sense, a small voice said in the back of her head. If she's a Black Sister I don't know about, why did she not hand us over to Liandrin? She could have. We'd have gone with her like lambs. Cold rage would not let her listen. A Black Sister had made her dance like a puppet and then told her to forget, ordered her to forget, and she had. Well, now the woman would find out what it was like to face her ready and forewarned. Before she could reach for the true source, Birgitta was suddenly beside the next column in that short white coat and wide yellow trousers gathered at the ankle. Birgitta, or some woman dreaming she was Birgitta, with golden hair in an elaborate braid. A warning finger pressed against her lips, she pointed at Nynaeve, then urgently toward one of the double-arched doorways behind them. Black blue eyes compelling, she vanished. Nynaeve shook her head. Whoever the woman was, she had no time. Opening herself to Saidar, she turned, filled to overflowing with the one power and righteous wrath. The woman clothed in mist was gone. Gone! Because that golden-haired fool had distracted her. Perhaps that one was still about, waiting for her. Wrapped in the power, she strode through the doorway the woman had indicated. Golden-haired woman was waiting in a brightly carpeted hallway where unlit golden lamps gave off the scent of perfumed oil. She held a silver bow now, and a quiver of silver arrows hung at her waist. "Who are you?" Nynaeve demanded furiously. She would give the woman a chance to explain herself, and then teach her a lesson she would not soon forget. "Are you the same fool who shot at me in the waist, claiming she was Birgitta? I was about to teach a member of the Black Ajah manners when you let her get away." "I am Birgitta," the woman said, leaning on her bow. "At least, that is the name you would know. And the lesson might have been yours, here as surely as in the Threefold Land. I remember the lives I have lived as if they were books well read, the longer gone, dimmer than the nearer. But I remember well when I fought at Luz Theron's side. I will never forget Moghedine's face, any more than I will forget the face of Asmodean, the man you almost disturbed at Rhuidean." Asmodean? Moghedine? That woman was one of the Forsaken? A Forsaken in Tanchico, and one in Rhuidean, in the Waste. Egwene would certainly have said something if she knew. No way to warn her, not for 7 days. Anger and Saidar surged in her. "What are you doing here? I know that you all vanished after the Horn of Valir called you, but you were..." She held off, a trifle flustered at what she had been about to say, but the other woman calmly finished for her. "Dead? Those of us who are bound to the wheel are not dead as others are dead. Where better for us to wait until the wheel weaves us out in new lives than in the world of dreams?" Birgitta laughed suddenly. "I begin to talk as if I were a philosopher. In almost every life I can remember, I was born a simple girl who took up the bow. I am an archer, no more. The heroine of 100 Tales, Nynaeve said, and I saw what your arrows did at Falma. Shan-Shan channeling did not touch you. Brigitta, we face near a dozen of the Black Aja, and one of the Forsaken as well, it seems. We could use your help. The other woman grimaced, embarrassed and regretful. I cannot, Nynaeve. I cannot touch the world of flesh unless the Horn calls me again, or else the wheel weaves me out. If it did this moment, you would find only an infant mewling at her mother's breast. As for Falma, the Horn had called us. We were not there as you were, in the flesh. That is why the power could not touch us. Here, all is part of the dream, and the one power could destroy me as easily as you, more easily. I told you, I am an archer, a sometime soldier, no more. Her complex gold blade swung as she shook her head. I do not know why I am explaining. I should not even be talking to you. Why not? You've spoken to me before, and Egwene thought she saw you. That was you, wasn't it? Nynaeve frowned. How do you know my name? Do you just know things? I know what I see and hear. I have watched you and listened whenever I could find you. You and the other 2 women and the young man with his wolves. According to the precepts, we may speak to none who know they are in Tel'aran'rhiod. And yet evil walks the dream as well as the world of flesh. You who fight it attract me. Even knowing I can do almost nothing, I find myself wanting to help you. But I cannot. It violates the precepts which have held me for so many turns of the wheel that in my oldest, faintest memories I know I had already lived 100 times, or 1,000. Speaking to you violates precepts as strong as law. It does, said a harsh male voice. Nynaeve jumped and almost lashed out with the power. The man was dark and strongly muscled, with the long hilts of 2 swords thrusting above his shoulders as he strode the few paces from where he had appeared to Brigitta. With what she had heard from Brigitta, the swords were enough to name him as Gadol Cain, but where fair, golden-haired Brigitta was as beautiful as in the stories, he was definitely not. In fact, he was perhaps as ugly a man as Nynaeve had ever seen, his face wide and flat, his heavy nose too big, and his mouth a gash, far too broad. Brigitta smiled at him, though. Her touch on his cheek held more than fondness. It was a surprise to see he was the shorter. Stocky and muscled as he was, powerful in his movements, he gave the impression of being taller than he was. "They have almost always been linked," Brigitta told Nynaeve without taking her eyes from Cain's. "He is usually born well before me, so I know my time approaches again when I cannot find him, and I usually hate him at first sight in the flesh, but we nearly always end lovers or wed. A simple story, but I think we have spun it out in 1,000 variations." Cain ignored Nynaeve as though she did not exist. "The precepts exist for a reason, Brigitta. Nothing but strife and trouble has ever come from breaking them." His voice was indeed harsh, Nynaeve realized, not at all like that of the man in the stories. "Perhaps I cannot sit by while evil fights," Brigitta said quietly. "Or perhaps I simply hunger for the flesh again. It has been long since we were born last. The shadow rises again, Gadol. It rises here. We must fight it. That is the reason we were bound to the wheel. When the Horn calls us, we will fight. When the wheel weaves us, we will fight. Not until then." He glowered at her. "Have you forgotten what Mogadin promised you when we followed Lews Therin? I saw her, Brigitta. She will know you here." Brigitta turned to Nynaeve. "I will aid you as I can, but do not expect too much. Tel'aran'rhiod is the whole of my world, and I can do less here than you." Nynaeve blinked. The dark, heavy man had not moved that she had seen, but he suddenly stood 2 paces away, drawing a honing stone along one of his swords with a soft, silky rasp. Plainly, as far as he was concerned, Birgitta was speaking to the air. What can you tell of Mogadin, Birgitta? I must know what I can to face her. Leaning on her bow, Birgitta frowned thoughtfully. Facing Mogadin is difficult, and not only because she is forsaken. She hides and takes no risks. She attacks only where she sees weakness and moves only in shadows. If she fears defeat, she will run. She is not one to fight to the last, even when doing so has the chance of victory. A chance is not enough for Mogadin, but do not take her lightly. She is a serpent coiled in high grass, waiting her own moment to strike, with less compassion than the snake. Especially here, do not take her lightly. Lanfear always claimed Tel Riyadh for her own, but Mogadin could do things here far beyond Lanfear, though she has not Lanfear's strength in the world of flesh. I think she would not take the risk of confronting Lanfear. Nynaeve shivered, fear warring with the anger that let her contain the power. Mogadin, Lanfear. This woman spoke so casually of the Forsaken. Birgitta, what did Mogadin promise you? He knew what I was, even though I did not. How, I do not know. Birgitta glanced at Kane. He appeared absorbed in his sword, but she lowered her voice anyway. She promised to make me weep alone for as long as the wheel turns. She said it as a fact that simply had not happened yet. And yet, you are willing to help. As I can, Nynaeve. Remember that I told you not to expect too much. Once more, she looked at the man sharpening his sword. We will meet again, Nynaeve, if you are careful and survive. Hefting her silver bow, she went to put an arm around Kane's shoulders and murmur in his ear. Whatever she said, Kane was laughing as they vanished. Nynaeve shook her head. Careful. Everybody was telling her to be careful. A legendary hero who said she would help, only there was not much she could do. And one of the Forsaken in Tanchico. Thought of Mogadin, of what the woman had done to her, strengthened her anger until the one power pulsed in her like the sun. Abruptly, she was back in the great hall where she'd been standing before, almost hoping the woman had returned. But the hall was empty of life except for herself. Fury and the power roared through her till she thought her skin would crisp and blacken. Mogadin or any of the Black Sisters could sense her far more easily holding the power than without, but she held it anyway. She almost wanted them to find her so she could strike at them. Tamail was very likely still in Tel Riyadh. If she went back up to that bedchamber, she could settle Tamail once and for all. She could settle Tamail and warn the rest. It was enough to make her growl. What had Mogadin been smiling at? Striding out to the case, a wide glass box atop a carved table, she peered in. 6 mismatched figurines stood in a circle beneath the glass. A foot-tall nude woman balanced on the toes of one foot, dancing, all flowing lines, and a shepherdess less than half as large, playing the pipes with his crook on his shoulder and a sheep at his feet, were as similar as any two. She had no doubt what had attracted the Forsaken's smile, though. In the center of the circle, a red-lacquered wooden stand held a disc as big as a man's hand, divided into halves by a sinuous line, one side gleaming whiter than snow, the other blacker than pitch. It was made of Quaimdiar, she knew. She had seen its like, and only 7 had ever been made. One of the seals on the Dark One's prison, a focus for one of the locks that held him away from the world in Shaiol Ghul. This was perhaps as important a discovery as whatever it was that threatened Rand. This had to be gotten away from the Black Ajah. Suddenly she became aware of her reflection. The top of the case was the finest glass, without bubbles, and gave an image as clear as a mirror, if fainter. Dark green folds of silk draped her body so they showed every curve of breast and hip and thigh. Long honey braids full of jade beads framed a face with big brown eyes and a pouting mouth. The glow of Saidar did not show, of course. Disguised, so she did not even know herself, she walked about carrying a painted sign that screamed Aes Sedai. I can be careful, she muttered. Yet she held on a moment longer. The power filling her was like life bubbling along her limbs, all the pleasures she had ever known seeping through her flesh. In the end, feeling foolish took enough edge from her anger to allow her to let go. Or maybe it dulled her anger to where she could no longer hold on. Whatever the reason, it did not help her search. What she was after had to be somewhere in this huge hall among all these displays. Pulling her eyes away from what looked like the bones of a toothy lizard 10 paces long, she closed them. Need. Danger to the dragon reborn. To Rand. Need. Lift. She was standing inside the white silk rope along the walls, the edge of a white stone pedestal touching her dress. What lay on top did not look very dangerous at first glance. A necklace and 2 bracelets of jointed black metal, but she could come no closer to anything than this. Not without sitting on it, she thought wryly. She jerked her hand out to touch it.
We'll be right
Pain,
back.
sorrow, suffering, and jerked it back, gasping, the raw emotions still echoing in her head. Even her faint doubts vanished. This was what the Black Ajah was hunting. And if it still sat on this pedestal in Tel Ayran-Riyadh, it sat there in the waking world, too. She had beaten them. This white stone pedestal. Whirling around, she stared toward the glass case that held the Quain-Diar seal, located the place she had been standing when she first saw Mogadin. The woman had been looking at this pedestal, at the bracelets and collar. Mogadin had to know, but everything around her spun and blurred, fading. "Wake up, Nynaeve," Elaine muttered, suppressing a yawn as she shook the sleeping woman's shoulder. "It has to be an hour by now. I want some sleep, too. Wake up, or I'll see how you like your head in a bucket of water." Nynaeve's eyes popped open, staring up at her. If she knows what it is, why hasn't she given it to them? If they know who she is, why does she have to look at it in Tel Ayran-Riyadh? Is she hiding from them, too? "What are you talking about?" Braids tossing about as she wriggled up to sit with her back against the head of the bed, Nynaeve jerked her silk shift down. "I will tell you what I am talking about." Elaine's mouth fell open as Nynaeve unfolded the tale of what her meeting with Egwene had become. Searching with Need, Mogadin, Brigitta and Gadel Kane, the black metal necklace and bracelets, Asmodeon in the waist, one of the seals on the Dark One's prison in the Panarch's palace. Elaine sank down weakly onto the side of the mattress, long before Nynaeve came to Tamail and the Panarch, thrown in almost as an afterthought, and changing her appearance, masquerading as Rendra. If Nynaeve's face had not been grimly serious, Elaine could have thought it one of Tom's wilder stories. Egyanin, sitting up cross-legged in her linen shift, hands on knees, looked close to disbelieving. Elaine hoped Nynaeve did not start a row because she had loosed the woman's wrists. Mogadin, that was the most horrifying part. One of the Forsaken in Tanchico. One of the Forsaken weaving the power around the two of them, making them tell her everything. Elaine could not remember a bit of it. The thought was enough to press both her hands to a suddenly queasy stomach. Don't know whether Mogadin... Right. Could she really have just walked in and made us... Is hiding from Liandrin and the others, Nynaeve? It sounds what Brigitta... Right. Brigitta giving her advice, said of her... Whatever Mogadin is up to, Nynaeve said in a tight voice, I mean to pick a bone clean with her. She slumped back against the flower-carved headboard. In any case, we have to get the seal away from them, as well as this necklace and bracelets. Elaine shook her head. How can jewelry be dangerous to Rand? Are you sure? Are they a ter'angreal of some sort? What did they look like exactly? They looked like a necklace and bracelets, Nynaeve snapped in exasperation. 2 jointed bracelets made of some black metal, and a wide necklace like a black collar. Her eyes darted to Egyanin, but no faster than Elaine's. Unperturbed, the dark-haired woman knelt up to sit on her heels. I have never heard of an Eidam made for a man, or any like the one you describe. No one tries to control a man who can channel. It is exactly what this is for, Elaine said slowly. Oh, right. I suppose I was hoping it didn't exist. At least Nynaeve had found it first. At least they had a chance to stop it being used against Rand. Nynaeve's eyes narrowed as she took in Egyanan's free hands, but she did not mention them. Mogadeen must be the only one who knows. It makes no sense otherwise. If we can find a way into the palace, we can take the seal and the whatever it is. And if we can bring Amathera out as well, Liandrin and her cronies will find the Panarch's Legion and the Civil Watch and maybe the White Cloaks closing in. They'll not all be able to channel their way out of that. The problem is getting inside undetected. I have had a few thoughts on that, Elaine told her. But I fear the men are going to give us difficulties over it. You leave them to me, Nynaeve snorted. A thumping clatter rose in the hall. A man shouted. As quickly as it began, silence fell once more. Tom was on watch out there. Thane darted to pull open the door, embracing Saidar as she walked, but Nynaeve scrambled off the bed right behind her, and Egyanan as well. Tom was just picking himself up off the floor, a hand to his head. Julian, with his Domon with his cudgel, stood over a man with pale yellow hair, lying face down on the floor, unconscious. Elaine hurried to Tom, trying gently to help him up. He gave her a grateful smile, but stubbornly pushed her hands away. I am quite all right, child. All right? A knot was rising on his temple. The fellow was walking down the hall when suddenly he kicked me in the head. After my purse, I suppose. Just like that. Kicked in the head and he was all right. He would have had it too, Julian said, if I had not come to see if Tom wanted a relief. Did I not decide? Domon muttered. Their hostility seemed less focused for a change. It took Elaine only a moment to realize why. Nynaeve and Egyanan were in the hall in their shifts. Julian was eyeing them both in an approving manner that would have caused trouble if Renbra had seen it, though he was at least trying not to be obvious. Domon made no effort at all to hide his frank appraisal of Egyanan, crossing his arms and pursing his lips in disgusting fashion while looking her up and down. The situation dawned on the other women quickly, but their reactions were quite different. Nynaeve, in her thin white silk, gave the thief-catcher a flat stare and strode stiffly into the room, poking a somewhat flushed face back around the side of the doorframe. Egyanan, whose linen shift was considerably longer and thicker than Nynaeve's, Egyanan, who had been cool serenity while being made prisoner, who fought like a warder, Egyanan went wide-eyed and crimson-faced, gasping in horror. Elaine stared, amazed, as the Shanshan woman gave a mortified shriek and leaped back inside. Doors flung open and down the hall, heads popped out. They vanished instantly to the bang of slamming doors at the sight of a man stretched out on the floor and others standing over him. Heavy dragging noises suggested people blocking themselves in with beds or wardrobes. Long moments later, Egyanan finally peeked out opposite Nynaeve, still scarlet to her hair. Elaine really did not understand. The woman was in her shift, true, but it covered her very nearly as well as Elaine's Tarrabona dress did. Still, Julian and Domon had no right to ogle. She fixed the pair with a stare that should have set them to rights immediately. Unfortunately, Domon was too busy chuckling and rubbing his upper lip to notice. At least Julian saw, even if he did sigh heavily the way men did when they considered themselves put upon unfairly. Avoiding her eyes, he bent to heave the pale-haired fellow onto his back. A handsome enough man, slender. I know this fellow, Julian exclaimed. This is the man who tried to rob me. Or so I thought, he added more slowly. I do not believe in coincidence, not unless the Dragon Reborn is in the city. Elaine exchanged frowns with Nynaeve. Surely the stranger was not in the employ of Liandrin. The Black Ajah would not use men to sneak about the halls any more. Me more than they would have hired street toughs. Elaine moved her gaze to Egyanin questioningly. Nynaeve's was more demanding. He is Seanchan, Egyanin said after a moment. A rescue attempt? Nynaeve murmured dryly, but the other woman shook her head. I do not doubt he was looking for me, but not for rescue, I think. If he knows, or even suspects, that I let Bethamin go free, he would be wanting to talk with me. Elaine suspected it was rather more than talk, confirmed when Egyanin added, It might be best if you slit his throat. He may try to make trouble for you, too, if he thinks you are friends, or if he discovers you are Aes Sedai. The big Ilianer smuggler gave her a shocked look, and Julian's jaw dropped almost to his chest. Tom, on the other hand, nodded in a disturbingly thoughtful fashion. I'm not here to slit Seanchan throats, Nynaeve said, as though that might change later. Bale, Julian, put him out in the alley behind the inn. By the time he wakes, he'll be lucky to have his small clothes. Tom, find Rendra and tell her we want strong tea in the Chamber of Falling Blossoms. And ask if she has any willow bark or akum. I will make you something for your head. The three men stared at her. Well, move, she snapped. We have plans to make. She barely gave Elaine time to get back inside before closing the door with a bang and beginning to pull her dress over her head. Egyanin scrambled into hers as though the men were still looking at her. The better way is to ignore them, Egyanin, Elaine said. It was odd to be advising someone older than Nynaeve, but however competent the Seanchan woman was in other ways, she clearly knew little about men. It only encourages them otherwise. I do not know why, she admitted, but it does. You were quite decently covered, really. Egyanin's head pushed out at the top of her dress. Decent? I am not a serving girl. I am no shade dancer. Her scowl became a perplexed frown. He is rather good-looking, though. I had not thought him so before. Wondering what a shade dancer was, Elaine went to help her with her buttons. Rendra will have something to say to you if you allow Julian to flirt with you. The dark-haired woman gave her a startled look over her shoulder. The thief-catcher? It was Bale Domon I meant. A properly set-up man. But a smuggler, she sighed regretfully. A lawbreaker. Lane supposed there was no accounting for tastes. Nynaeve certainly loved Lan, and he was much too stone-faced and intimidating. But Bale Domon? The man was half as wide as he was tall, as thick as an ogier. You chatter like Rendra, Elaine, Nynaeve snapped. She was struggling to do up her dress, both hands behind her. If you have finished blathering about men, perhaps you won't mind skipping over the new seamstress you've no doubt found? We must make plans. If we wait until we're with the men, they will try to take it over, and I am in no mood to waste time putting them in their place. Have you finished with her yet? I could use some help myself. Quickly fastening Egyanin's last small button, Elaine went coolly to Nynaeve. She did not talk about men and dresses, not nearly as much as Rendra. Holding her braids out of the way, Nynaeve gave her a frown when she tugged sharply at the other woman's dress to do up the buttons. The close-spaced triple row up the back was necessary, not simply ornament. Nynaeve would let Rendra talk her into the most fashionably cut bodices, and then say other people spent all their time thinking about clothes. She certainly thought of other things. I have been thinking how we can move inside the palace unnoticed, Nynaeve. We can be all but invisible. As she talked, Nynaeve's frowns smoothed out. Nynaeve herself had conceived a way to enter the palace. When Egyanin made a few suggestions, Nynaeve's mouth tightened, but the notions were sensible, and even Nynaeve could not reject them out of hand. By the time they were ready to go down to the Chamber of Falling Blossoms, they had a plan agreed upon, and no intention of letting the men change a whit of it. Mogadin, the Black Ajah, whoever were running things in the Panarch's palace, were going to lose their prizes before they knew what had happened.
Chapter 53. The price of a departure. Only 3 candles and 2 lamps lit the wine spring inn, since candles and oil both were in short supply. The spears and other weapons were gone from the walls. The barrel that had held old swords was empty. The lamps stood on 2 of the tables pushed together in front of the tall stone fireplace, where Maren Alvear and Days Conger and others of the women's circle were going over lists of the scanty food remaining in Emmons Field. Perrin tried not to listen. At another table, Fail's honing stone made a soft, steady whisk-whisk as she sharpened one of her knives. A bow lay in front of her, and a bristling quiver hung at her belt. She had turned out to be a fairly good shot, but he hoped she never discovered that it was a boy's bow. She could not draw a man's Two Rivers longbow, though she refused to admit it. Shifting his axe so it would not dig into his side, he tried to put his mind back on what he was discussing with the men around the table with him. Not that all of them were keeping their own attention where it should be. "They have lamps," Sen muttered, "and we make do with tallow." The gnarled old man glared at the pair of candles in brass candlesticks. "Over, Sen," Tam said wearily, pulling pipe and tobacco pouch from behind his sword belt. "For once, give over." "If we had to read or write," Abel said, his voice less patient than the words, "we'd have lamps." A bandage was wound around his temples. As if to remind the Thatcher that he was mayor, Bran adjusted the silver medallion hanging on his wide chest, showing a pair of scales. "Give your mind to the business at hand, Sen. I'll have none of your wasting Perrin's time." "I just think we should have lamps," Sen complained. "Perrin would tell me if I was wasting his time." Perrin sighed. The knight tried to drag his eyelids down. He wished it were someone else's turn to represent the village council. Paro Luhan, or John Thane, or Samuel Craw, or anybody but Sen with his carping. But then, sometimes he wished one of these men would turn to him and say, "This is business for the mayor and the council, young fellow. You go on back to the forge. We'll let you know what to do." Instead, they worried about wasting his time, deferred to him. How many attacks have there been in the 7 days since the first? He was not sure any longer. The bandage on Abel's head irritated Perrin. The Aes Sedai only healed the most serious wounds now. If a man could manage without, they let him. It was not that there were many badly wounded yet, but as Varen pointed out wryly, even an Aes Sedai only had so much strength. Apparently, their trick with the catapult stones took as much as... For once, he did not want to be reminded of limits to Aes Sedai strength. Not many badly wounded. Yet. "Are the arrows holding out?" he asked. That was what he was supposed to be thinking about. "Not enough," Tam said, puffing his pipe alight from one of the candles. "We still recover most of what we shoot, in daylight at least. They drag a lot of their dead away at night. Fodder for the cookpots, I suppose. And we lose those." The other men were digging out their pipes too, from pouches and coat pockets. Sen muttering that he seemed to have forgotten his pouch. Grumbling, Bran passed his across, his bald pate gleaming in the candlelight. Bran rubbed at his forehead. What had he meant to ask next? The stakes. There was fighting at the stakes in most attacks now, especially at night. How many times had the Trollocs nearly broken through? 3? 4? Does anybody have a spear or some sort of polearm now? What's left to make more? Silence answered him, and he lowered his hand. The other men were staring at him. "You asked that yesterday," Abel said gently. "And Harl told you then there isn't a scythe or a pitchfork left in the village that hasn't been made into a weapon. We've more than we have hands for, in truth." "Yes, of course. It just slipped my mind." A snatch of conversation from the women's circle caught his ear. "No," Maren was saying softly, as if repeating a caution voiced before. "Of course not," Days snorted, but not much louder. "If the fools find out the women are on half rations, they'll insist on eating the same. And we can't. Perrin closed his eyes, tried to close his ears. Of course, the men did the fighting. The men had to keep their strength up. Simple. At least none of the women had had to fight yet. Except the two Aiel women, of course, and Fail. But she was smart enough to stay back when it came to pushing spears among the stakes. It was the reason he had found the bow for her. She had the heart of a leopard, and more courage than any two men. I think it is time you went to bed, Perrin, Rand suggested. You cannot go on like this, sleeping an hour here and an hour there. Scrubbing his beard vigorously, Perrin tried to look alert. I'll sleep later, when it was over. Are the men getting enough sleep? I've seen some sitting up when they should be. The front door banged open to admit skinny Daniel Lewin out of the night, bow in hand, and all in a lather. He wore one of the swords from the barrel on his hip. Tam had been giving classes when he had the time, and sometimes one of the warders did as well. Before Daniel could open his mouth, Day snapped, "Were you raised in a barn, Daniel Lewin?" "And certainly treat my door a little more gently." Lauren divided her meaning look between the lanky man and Day's, a reminder that it was her door. Daniel ducked his head, clearing his throat. "Pardon, Mr. Xavier," he said hastily. "Pardon, Wisdom. Sorry to burst in, but I've a message for Perrin." He hurried to the table of men, as if afraid the women would stop him again. "White Cloaks brought in a man who wants to talk to you, Perrin. He won't talk to anybody else. He's hurt bad, Perrin. They only brought him to the edge of the village. I don't think he can make it as far as the inn." Perrin pushed himself to his feet. "I'm coming." Not another attack, at any rate. They were worst at night. Fail snatched up her bow and joined them before he reached the door. And Aram stood up, hesitating from the shadows on the foot of the stairs. Sometimes Perrin forgot the man was there. He kept so still. He looked odd with that sword strapped on his back atop his grimy, yellow-striped tinker coat, his eyes so bright, hardly ever seeming to blink, and his face without expression. Neither Rain or Isla had spoken to their grandson since the day he picked up that sword. Nor to Perrin, either. "You're coming, come," he said gruffly, and Aram fell in at his heels. The man followed him like a hound whenever he was not pestering Tam or Ivan or Tomas to teach him that sword. It was as if he had replaced his family and people with Perrin. Perrin would have done without the responsibility if he could, but there it was. Moonlight shone down on thatched roofs. Few houses had a light in more than one window. Stillness clung to the village. Some 30 of the companions stood guard outside the inn with their bows, as many wearing swords as could find them. Everyone had adopted that name, and Perrin found himself using it too, to his private disgust. The reason for guards on the inn, or wherever Perrin was, lay on the green, no longer so crowded with sheep and cows. The fires crowded above the wine spring, beyond where that fool Wolfhead banner hung limp. Bright pools in the darkness, surrounded by pale cloaks, gleaming with the moon. No one had wanted White Cloaks in their homes, already crowded, and Bornhall did not want his soldiers split up in any case. The man seemed to think the village would call his men any moment. If they followed Perrin, they must be dark friends. Even Perrin's eyes could not make out faces around the fires, but he thought he could feel Bornhall's stare, waiting, hating. Daniel readied 10 companions to escort Perrin, all young men who should have been laughing and carousing with him, all with bows ready to see him safe. Aram did not join them as Daniel led the way down the dark dirt street. It was Perrin he was with, and no one else. Fail kept hard by Perrin's side, dark eyes shining in the moonlight, scanning the surroundings as though she were his whole protection. Where the old road entered Emmons Field, the blocking wagons had been drawn aside to admit the White Cloak patrol. 20 snow-cloaked men with lances who sat their horses in burnished armor, no less impatient than their stamping mounts. They stood out in the night for any eye, and most Trollocs could see as well in darkness as Perrin. But the White Cloaks insisted on their patrols. Sometimes their scouting had brought warnings, and maybe their harassment kept the Trollocs a little off balance. It would have been good, though, if he had known what they were doing before it was done. A cluster of villagers and farmers wearing bits of old armor and a few rusty helmets stood clustered around a man in a farmer's coat lying in the roadway. They gave way for Fail and him, and he went to one knee beside the man. The odor of blood was strong. Sweat glistened on the man's moon-shadowed face. Thumb-thick Trolloc arrow, like a small spear, went through his chest.
Perrin, Golden Eyes,
he muttered hoarsely, laboring for breath.
Must get through to Perrin, Golden Eyes.
Has someone sent for one of the Aes Sedai? Perrin demanded, lifting the man as gently as he could, cradling his head. He did not listen for the answer. He did not think this man would last until an Aes Sedai came.
I am Perrin. Golden Eyes, I cannot see very well.
His wide, wild stare was right at Perrin's face. If he could see at all, the fellow must see his eyes shining golden in the dark.
I am Perrin, Golden Eyes,
he said reluctantly. The man seized his collar, pulling his face close with surprising strength.
They are coming. Sent to tell you we are
His head fell back, eyes staring at nothing now.
Light be with his soul,
Fail murmured, slinging her bow across her back. After a moment, Perrin pried the man's fingers loose. Does anyone know him? The Two Rivers men exchanged glances, shook their heads, and looked up at the mounted White Cloaks. Did he say anything else while you were bringing him in? Where did you find him? Art Byer stared down at him, gaunt-faced and hollow-eyed, an image of death. The other White Cloaks looked away, but Byer always made himself meet Perrin's yellow eyes, especially at night when they glowed. Byer growled under his breath. Perrin heard shadows spawn, and booted his horse in the ribs. The patrol galloped into the village, as eager to be away from Perrin as from Trollocs. Aram stared after them, expressionless, one hand over his shoulder to finger his sword hilt. Said they found him 3 or 4 miles south. Daniel hesitated, then added, They say the Trollocs are all scattered out in little bunches, Perrin. Maybe they're finally giving up. And laid the stranger back down. We are coming. Keep a close watch. Maybe some family who tried to hold on to their farm is finally coming in. Not believe anyone could have survived out there this long, but it might be so. Don't shoot anybody by mistake. He staggered to his feet, and Fail put a hand on his arm. It is time you were in bed, Perrin. You have to sleep sometime. He only looked at her. He could have made her stay in Tyr. Somehow he should have made her. If he had only thought well enough, he could have. One of the runners, a curly-haired boy about chest-high, slipped through the Two Rivers men to tug at Perrin's sleeve. Perrin did not know him. There were many families in from the countryside. There's something moving in the Westwood, Lord Perrin. They sent me to tell you. Don't call me that, Perrin told him sharply. If he did not stop the children, the companions are going to start using it too. Tell them I will be there. The boy darted away. You belong in your bed, Fail said firmly. Tomas can handle any attack very well. Isn't an attack, or the boy would have said so, and somebody would be sounding Sen's bugle. She hung onto his arm, trying to pull him toward the inn, so she was dragged along when he started the opposite way. After a few futile minutes, she gave up and pretended she had been merely holding his arm all along. But she muttered to herself. She still seemed to think that if she spoke softly enough, he could not hear. She began with foolish, mule-headed, and muscle-brained. After that, it escalated. It was quite a little procession, her muttering at him, Aram healing him, Daniel and the 10 companions surrounding him like a guard of honor. If he had not been so tired, he would have felt a proper fool. There were guards spaced in small clusters all along the sharp stake fence to watch the night, each with a boy for a runner. At the west end of the village, the men on guard were all gathered up against the inside of the broad barrier, fingering spears and bows as they peered toward the westward. Even with the moonlight, the trees had to be blackness in their eyes. Tomas's cloak seemed to make parts of him vanish in the night. Bane and Chiad were with him. For some reason, the two maidens had spent every night at this end of Emmons Field since Loyal and Gull left.
I'd not have bothered you,
The warder said to Perrin.
but there only seems to be one out there. And I thought you might be able to...
Perrin nodded. Everyone knew about his vision, especially in darkness. The Two Rivers people seemed to think it something special, something that marked him out an idiot hero. What the warders thought, or the Aes Sedai, he had no idea. He was too tired to care tonight. 7 days, and how many attacks? The edge of the Westwood lay 500 paces away. Even to his eyes, the trees ran together in shadows. Something moved. Something big enough to be a Trolloc. A big shape carrying... Burden lifted an arm. A human. A tall shadow carrying a human.
We will not shoot!
He shouted. He wanted to laugh. In fact, he realized he was laughing.
Come on! Come on, Loyal!
Dim Shape lumbered forward faster than a man could run, resolving into the Ogier, speeding toward the village carrying Gaul. Two Rivers men shouted encouragement as if it were a race.
Run, Ogier! Run! Run!
It was a race. More than one assault had come out of those woods. Short of the stakes, Loyal slowed with a lurch. There was barely room for his thick legs to edge through the barrier sideways. Once on the village side, he let the Aielman down and sank to the ground, leaning back against the hedge, panting, tufted ears drooping wearily. Paul limped on one leg until he could sit too, with Bane and Chiad both fussing over his left thigh, where his breeches were ripped and black with dry blood. He only had 2 spears left, and his quiver gaped emptily. Loyal's axe was gone too.
Fool, Ogier.
Perrin laughed fondly.
Going off like that? I ought to let Days Conga switch you for a runaway. At least you're alive. At least you're back.
His voice sank at that. Alive. And back in Emmons Field.
You did it, Perrin.
Loyal panted, a tired drum-like boom.
4 days ago, we closed the way gate. It will take the Elders or an Aes Sedai to open it again. You carried me most of the way from the mountains,
Gaul said.
A Night Runner and perhaps 50 Trollocs chased us the first 3 days, but Loyal outran them.
He was trying to push the maidens away without much success.
Lie still, Sharad,
Chiad snapped.
or I will say I have touched you armed and allowed you to choose how your honor stands.
Aiel gave a delighted laugh. Perrin did not understand, but the remark reduced the imperturbable Aielman to splutters. Let the maidens tend his leg.
Are you all right, Loyal? Perrin asked. Are you hurt?
Ogier pulled himself up with an obvious effort, swaying for a moment like a tree about to fall. His ears still hung limp.
No, I am not hurt, Perrin. Only tired. Do not worry yourself about me. A long time out of the steady. Visits are not enough.
Shook his head as if his thoughts had wandered. His wide hand engulfed Perrin's shoulder.
I will be fine after a little sleep.
He lowered his voice. For an Ogier, he did. It was still a huge bumblebee rumble.
It is very bad out there, Perrin. We followed the last bands down, for the most part. We locked the gate. But I think there must be several thousand Trollocs in the Two Rivers already. And maybe as many as 50 Myrddraal. Not so,
Luke announced loudly. He had galloped up along the edge of the houses from the direction of the North Road. He reined his rearing black stallion to a flashy halt, four hooves pawing. You are no doubt fine at singing to trees, Ogier, but fighting Trollocs is something different. I estimate less than 1,000 now. A formidable force to be sure, but nothing these stout defenses and brave men cannot hold at bay. The trophy for you, Lord Perrin Goldeneyes. Laughing, he tossed a bulging cloth bag at Perrin. The bottom gleamed darkly wet in the moonlight. Perrin caught it out of the air and hurled it well over the stakes despite its weight. 4 or 5 Trolloc heads, no doubt, and perhaps a Murdral. The man brought in his trophies every night, still seeming to expect them to be put up for everyone to admire. A bunch of the Coplans and Congers had given him a feast the night he came in with a pair of Fades heads. I also know nothing of fighting, Gall demanded, struggling to his feet. I say there are several thousand. Luke's teeth showed white in a smile. How many days have you spent in the Blight, Aiel? I have spent many. Perhaps it was more snarl than smile. Many. Believe what you wish, Goldeneyes. The endless days will bring what they bring, as they always have. He pulled the stallion up on its hind legs again to whirl about, and galloped in among the houses and the trees that had once been the rim of the Westwood. 2 Rivers men shifted uneasily, peering after him, or out into the night.
He is wrong,
Loyal said.
Gall and I saw what we saw.
His face sagged wearily. Broad mouth turned down, and long eyebrows drooping on his cheeks. No wonder if he had carried Gall for 3 or 4 days. You've done a lot, Loyal, Perrin said. You and Gall both. A great thing. I'm afraid your bedroom has half a dozen tinkers in it now, but Mistress Alvir will make you up a pallet. It is time for you to get some of that sleep you want. And time for you as well, Perrin Aybara. Scudding clouds made moon shadows play across Fael's bold nose and high cheekbones. She was so beautiful, but her voice was firm enough for a wagon bed. If you do not go now, I will have Loyal carry you. You can hardly stand. Paul was having trouble walking with his wounded leg. Bane supported him from one side. He tried to stop Chiad from taking the other, but she murmured something that sounded like Gaishine in a threatening way. And Bane laughed, and the Aielman allowed them both to help him, growling furiously to himself. Whatever the maidens were going on about, it did have Gall in a taking. Boss clapped Perrin on the shoulder. Go, man. Everyone needs to sleep. He himself sounded good for 3 more days without it. Perrin nodded. He let Fael guide him back to the Wine Spring Inn with Loyal and the Aiel following, and Aram and Danel and the 10 companions encircling him. He was not sure when the others fell away, but somehow he and Fael were alone in his room on the 2nd floor of the inn. Whole families are making do with no more space than this, he muttered. A candle burned on the stone mantel over the small fireplace. Others did without, but Marin lit one here as soon as it turned dark, so he would not have to be bothered. I can sleep outside with Danel and Ban and the others. Do not be an idiot, Fael said, making it sound affectionate. If Alana and Varen each has her own room, you should too. Realized she had his coat off and was untying the laces of his shirt. I am not too tired to undress myself. He pushed her gently outside. You take everything off, she ordered. Everything, do you hear? You cannot sleep properly fully dressed, the way you seem to think. I will, he promised. When he had the door closed, he did tug off his boots before blowing out the candle and lying down. Marn would not like dirty boots on her coverlet. Thousands, Gall and Loyal said. Yet how much could the 2 of them have seen? Hiding on the way into the mountains, fleeing on the way back. Maybe 1,000 at most, Luke claimed. But Perrin could not make himself trust the man for all the trophies he brought in. Scattered, according to the White Cloaks. How close could they have come? Armor and cloaks shining in the darkness like lanterns. was a way to see for himself, perhaps. He had avoided the wolf dream since his last visit. The desire to hunt down this slayer rose up whenever he thought of going back, and his responsibilities lay here in Emmons Field. But now, perhaps... Sleep rolled in while he was still considering. He stood on the green, bathed by an afternoon sun low in the sky, a few white clouds drifting. No sheep or cattle around the tall pole where a breeze ruffled the red wolf-head banner, though a blue fly buzzed past his face. No people among the thatched houses. Small piles of dry wood atop ashes marked the White Cloaks' fires. He had rarely seen anything burning in the wolf dream, only what was ready to burn or already charred. No ravens in the sky. As he scanned for the birds, a patch of sky darkened, became a window to somewhere else. Gwaine stood among a crowd of women, fear in her eyes. Slowly the women knelt around her. Nynaeve was one of them, and he believed he saw Elaine's red gold hair. That window faded and was replaced. Matt stood naked and bound, snarling. An odd spear with a black shaft had been thrust across his back behind his elbows, and a silver medallion, a fox head, hung on his chest. It vanished, and it was Rand. Perrin thought it was Rand. He wore rags and a rough cloak, and a bandage covered his eyes. The third window disappeared. The sky was only sky, empty except for the clouds. Perrin shivered. These wolf dream visions never seemed to have any real connection to anything he knew. Maybe here, where things could change so easily, worry over his friends became something he could see. Whatever they were, he was wasting time fretting at them. He was not surprised to find he wore a blacksmith's long leather vest and no shirt. But when he put a hand to his belt, he found the hammer, not his axe. Frowning, he concentrated on the long half-moon blade and thick spike. That was what he needed now. That was what he was now. The hammer changed slowly, as if resisting. But when the axe finally hung in the thick loop, it kept shining dangerously. Why did it fight him so? He knew what he wanted. A filled quiver appeared on his other hip, a longbow in his hand, a leather bracer on his left forearm. 3 land-blurring strides took him where the nearest Trolloc camp supposedly lay, 3 miles from the village. The last step landed him among nearly a dozen tall heaps of wood, laid on old ashes amid trampled-down barley, the logs mixed with broken chairs and table legs, and even a farmhouse door. 8 black iron cauldrons stood ready to be hung over the laid cook fires. Empty cauldrons, of course, though he knew what would be cut up into them, what would be spitted on the thick iron rods stretched over some of the fires. How many Trollocs would these fires serve? There were no tents, and the blankets scattered about, filthy and stinking of old acrid Trolloc sweat, were no real guide. Many Trollocs slept like animals, uncovered on the ground, even hollowing out a hole to lie in. The smaller steps that covered no more than 100 paces each, the land seemed only to haze. He circled Emmons Field from farm to farm, pasture to barley field to rows of tobacco, through scattered copses of trees, along cart paths and footpaths, finding more and more clusters of waiting Trolloc fires as he slowly spiraled outward. Many. Hundreds of fires. That had to mean several thousand Trollocs. 5,000 or 10, or twice that, it would make little difference to Emmons Field if they all came at once. Farther south, the signs of Trollocs vanished. Signs of their immediate presence, at least. Few farmhouses or barns stood unburned. Scattered fields of charred stubble remained where barley or tobacco had been torched. Others had great swaths trampled through the crops. No reason for it but the joy of destruction. The people had been long gone when most of it was done. Once he lighted in the midst of large patches of ash, some charred wagon wheels, still showing hints of bright color here and there. The sight of the Tuathawan caravan's destruction pained him even more than the farmhouses. Way of the Leaf should have a chance. Somewhere. Not here. Not letting himself look, he leaped south a mile or more. Eventually he came to Devon Ride, rows of thatch-roofed houses surrounding a green and a pond, fed by a spring, walled round with stone, the spillover splashing from cuts long since worn deeper than they had been made. The inn at the head of the green, the Goose and Pipe, was roofed with thatch too, yet a little larger than the Wine Spring Inn, though Devon Ride surely had even fewer visitors than Emmons Field. The village was certainly no bigger. Wagons and carts drawn close by every house spoke of farmers who had fled here with their families. Other wagons blocked the streets and the spaces between the houses, all the way around the edge of the village. The precautions were not enough to have halted even one of the assaults made on Emmons Field the last 7 days. 3 circuits around the village, Perrin found only half a dozen Trolloc camps. Enough to keep people in. Pen them until Emmons Field was dealt with. Then the Trollocs could fall on Devon Ride at the Fade's leisure. Perhaps he could find a way to get word to these villagers. If they fled south, they might find some way across the White River. Even trying to cross the trackless forest of shadows below the river was better than waiting to die.
Be
Golden
right back.
Sun had not moved an inch. Time was different here. Running north as hard as he could, even Emmons Field passed by in a blur. Chill, on its round prominence, was bordered as Devon Ride had been, with wagons and carts between the houses. A banner waved lazily in the breeze, on a tall pole in front of the White Boar on the hill's crest. A red eagle flying across a field of blue. The red eagle had been the symbol of Manetheren. Perhaps Alana or Varen had told ancient stories while they were in Watch Hill. Here, too, he found only a few Trolloc camps, enough to pen the villagers. There was an easier way out from here than trying to cross the White, with its endless stretch of rapids. On northward he ran to Tarren Ferry, on the bank of the Tarrendrel, which he had grown up calling the River Tarren. Tall, narrow houses built on high stone foundations to escape the Tarren's yearly flooding when the snows melted in the mountains of mist. Half those foundations supported only piles of ash and charred beams in that unchanging afternoon light. There were no wagons here, no signs of any defense, and no Trolloc camps that he could find.
What are you doing?
Perhaps no people remained here. At the water's edge stood a stout wooden dock, a heavy rope drooping as it arced across the swift-flowing river. The rope ran through iron rings on a flat-decked barge, snugged against the dock. The ferry was still there, still usable. Jump took him across the river, where wheel ruts scarred the bank and household objects lay about. Chairs and stand mirrors, chests, even a few tables and a polished wardrobe with birds carved on the doors. All the things panicked people had tried to save, then abandoned to run faster. They would be spreading the word of what had happened here, what was happening in the 2 rivers. Some could have reached Baerlon by now, 100 miles or more north, and surely the farms and villages. Another month it might reach Caemlyn, and Queen Morgase with her queen's guards and her power to raise armies. A month with luck. And as much to return once Morgase believed. Too late for Emmons Field. Maybe too late for the whole 2 rivers. Still, it hardly made sense that the Trollocs had let anyone escape. Or the Myrddraal, at any rate. Trollocs did not seem to think much beyond the moment. You would have thought destroying the ferry would have been the Fade's first task. How could they be sure there were not enough soldiers at Baerlon to come down on them? He bent to pick up a doll with a painted wooden face, and an arrow streaked through where his chest had been. Springing out of his crouch, he leaped up the bank, a blur streaking 100 paces into the woods to crouch below a tall leatherleaf. Brush and flood-toppled trees, woven with creepers, covered the forest floor around him. Slayer. Perrin had an arrow knocked and wondered if he had drawn it from his quiver or simply thought it there. Slayer. On the point of leaping away again, he paused. Slayer would know roughly where he was. Perrin had followed the man's blurring form easily enough. That elongated streak was clear if he were standing still. Twice now he had played the other's game and nearly lost. Slayer play his this time. He waited. Ravens swooped above the treetops, searching and calling. No movement to give him away, not a twitch. Only his eyes moved, studying the forest around him. A vagrant puff of air brought him a cold smell, human yet not, and he smiled. No sound save the ravens, though. The slayer stalked well. He was not used to being hunted. What else did Slayer forget besides smells? He surely would not expect Perrin to remain where he had landed. Animals ran from the hunter. Even wolves ran. Hint of movement, and for an instant a face appeared above a fallen pine some 50 paces away. The slanting light illuminated it clearly. Dark hair and blue eyes. A face all hard planes and angles. So reminiscent of Lan's face. Except that in that brief glimpse, Slayer licked his lips twice. His forehead was creased and his eyes darted as they searched. Lan would not have let his worry show if he stood alone against 1,000 Trollocs. Just an instant and the face was gone again. The ravens darted and swirled above, as if they shared Slayer's anxiety, fearing to come below the treetops. Perrin waited and watched, motionless. Silence. Only the cold smell to say he was not alone with the ravens overhead. Slayer's face appeared again, peering around a thick bold oak off to his left. 30 paces. Oaks killed most of what grew close to them. Only a few mushrooms and weed things sprouted from the leafy mulch beneath its limbs. Slowly the man emerged into the open, boots making no sound. One motion Perrin drew and fired. The ravens screamed warning, and Slayer spun to take the broadhead shaft in his chest, but not through the heart. The man howled, clutching the arrow with both hands. Black feathers rained down as the ravens beat their wings in a frenzy. And Slayer faded. Him and his cry together, growing misty, transparent, vanishing. The raven's shrieks vanished as if severed with a knife. The arrow that had transfixed the man dropped to the ground. The ravens were gone too. The second shaft half drawn, Perrin exhaled slowly, let off his tension on the bowstring. Was that how you died here? Simply fading away, gone forever? At least I finished him, he muttered, and let himself be diverted in the process. Slayer was no part of why he had come to the Wolf Dream. At least the wolves were safe now. The wolves, and maybe a few others. He stepped out of the dream, and woke staring at the ceiling, his shirt clinging sweatily. The moon gave a little light through the windows. There were fiddles playing somewhere in the village, a wild tinker tune. They would not fight, but they had found a way to help by keeping spirits up. Slowly, Perrin sat up, pulling on his boots in the pale-lit dark. How to do what he had to do. It would be difficult. He had to be cunning. Only he was not sure he had ever been cunning in his life. Standing, he stamped his feet to settle them in. Suddenly, shouts outside and a fading clatter of hooves made him stride to the nearest window and throw up the sash. The companions were milling about below. "What's going on down there?" 30 faces turned up to him, and Ban Alcine yelled, "It was Lord Luke, Lord Perrin. He nearly rode down Will and Tell. I don't think he even saw them. He was all hunched over in his saddle like he was hurt, and spurring that stallion for all he was worth, Lord Perrin." And tugged at his beard. Luke had certainly not been wounded earlier. Luke? Slayer? It was impossible. Dark-haired Slayer looked like Lan's brother or cousin. If Luke, with his red gold hair, resembled anyone, maybe it was Rand a little. Two men could not have been more dissimilar. And yet, that cold smell. Did not smell the same, but both had an icy, hardly human scent. His ears picked up the sound of wagons being hauled out of the way down at the old road, shouts for haste. Even if Ben and the companions ran, they would not catch the man now. Hooves galloped south hard. "Man," he called. "If Luke shows up again, he's to be put under guard and kept there." He paused long enough to add, "And don't call me that," before hauling the sash down with a bang. Luke and Slayer. Slayer and Luke. How could they be the same? It was impossible. But then, less than 2 years gone, he had not really believed in Trollocs or Fades. Time enough to worry about it if he ever laid hands on the man again. Now there was Watch Hill and Devon Ride, and some could be saved. Not everyone in the Two Rivers had to die. His way to the common room, he paused at the top of the stairs. Aram stood up from the bottom step, watching him, waiting to follow where he led. Gaul lay stretched out on a pallet near the fireplace with a bandage thick around his left thigh, apparently asleep. Fail and the two maidens sat cross-legged on the floor near him, talking softly. A much larger pallet lay on the far side of the room, but Loyal sat on a bench with his legs stretched out so they would fit under one of the tables, nearly doubled over so he could scribble furiously with a pen by the light of a candle. No doubt he was recording what had happened on the journey to close the waygate. And if Perrin knew Loyal at all, the Ogier would have Gaul doing it all, whether he had or not. Loyal did not seem to think anything he himself did was brave or worth writing down. Except for them, the common room was empty. He could still hear those fiddles playing. He thought he recognized the tune. Not a tinker song now. My love is a wild rose. He looked up at Perrin's first step down, rising gracefully to meet him. Aram took his seat again when Perrin made no move toward the door. "Shirt is wet," Fail said accusingly. "You slept in it, didn't you? And your boots, I shouldn't wonder. It has not been an hour since I left you. You march yourself back upstairs before you fall down." "Did you see Luke leave?" he said. Her mouth tightened, but sometimes ignoring her was the only way. She managed to win too often when he argued with her. "He came running through here a few minutes ago and dashed out through the kitchen," she said finally. Those were the words. Her tone said she was not finished with him in bed. "He seemed to be injured." "Yes," she said slowly. "He staggered, and he was clutching something to his chest under his coat. A bandage, maybe. Mistress Conger is in the kitchen, but from what I heard, he all but ran over her." "Did you know?" "I dreamed it." Tilted eyes took on a dangerous light. She must not be thinking. She knew about the wolf dream. Did she expect him to explain what Bane and Chiad could hear, not to mention Aram and Loyal? Well, maybe not Loyal. He was so absorbed in his notes he would not have noticed a flock of sheep herded into the common room. Gaul? Mistress Conger gave him something to make him sleep, and a poultice for his leg. When the Aes Sedai wake in the morning, one of them will heal him, if they think it's serious enough. Sit down, Fail. I want you to do something for me. She eyed him suspiciously, but let him lead her to a chair. When they were seated, he leaned across the table, trying to make his voice serious but not urgent. On no account urgent. I want you to take a message to Caemlyn for me. On the way, you can let Watch Hill know how things are here. Actually, it might be best if they cross the Tarn until it's all done. It sounded properly casual, just a bit thrown in on the spur of the moment. I want you to ask Queen Morghese to send us some of the Queen's guards. I know it's a dangerous thing I'm asking, but Bane and Chiad can get you to Tarn Ferry safely, and the ferry is still there. Chiad stood up, staring at him anxiously. Why was she anxious? You will not have to leave him, Fail told her. After a moment, the Aiel woman nodded and resumed her seat beside Gall. Chiad and Gall? They were blood enemies. Nothing was making sense tonight. It's a long way to Caemlyn, Fail went on quietly. Her eyes very intent on his, but her face could have been wood for all the expression it had. Weeks to ride there, plus however long it might take to reach and convince Morghese, then more weeks to return with the Queen's guards. You can hold out that long easily, he told her. Burn me if I can't lie as well as Matt. Book was right. There can't be more than 1,000 Trollocs still out there. The dream? She nodded. At last, she understood. We can hold out here for a very long time. But in the meanwhile, they'll be burning crops and doing the light knows what. We'll need the Queen's guards to rid ourselves of them completely. You are the logical one to go. You know how to talk to a queen, being a queen's cousin and all. Fail, I know what I'm asking is dangerous. Not as dangerous as staying. But once you reach the ferry, you'll be on your way. Did not hear Loyal approach until the Ogier laid his book of notes down in front of Fail.
Could not help overhearing Fail. If you are going to Caemlyn, would you carry this? To keep it safe until I can come for it?
Scurrying the volume up almost tenderly, he added,
They print many very fine books in Caemlyn. Forgive me for interrupting, Baron.
But his teacup eyes were on her, not him.
Ill suits you. You should fly free, like a falcon.
Patting Perrin on the shoulder, he murmured in a deep rumble,
She should fly free.
He made his way to his pallet and lay down facing the wall. He is very tired, Perrin said, attempting to make it seem just a comment. Fool Ogier could ruin everything. If you leave tonight, you can be at Watch Hill by daybreak. You'll have to swing to the east. The Trollocs are fewer there. This is very important to me. To Emond's Field, I mean. Will you do it? She stared at him silently for so long, he wondered if she meant to answer. Her eyes seemed to glisten. Then she got up and sat down on his lap, stroking his beard. This needs trimming. I like it on you, but I do not want it down to your chest. He came close to gaping. She often changed the subject on him, but usually when she was losing an argument. Fail, please, I need you to carry this message to Caemlyn. Hand tightened in his beard, and her head swung as if she were arguing with herself inside her head. I will go, she said at last, but I want a price. You always make me do things the hard way. In Saldaea, I would not have to be the one who asked. My price is a wedding. I want to marry you, she finished up in a rush. And I you. He smiled. We can say the betrothal vows in front of the women's circle tonight, but I'm afraid the wedding has to wait a year. When you come back from Caemlyn, she very nearly yanked a handful of beard out of his chin. I will have you for husband tonight, she said in fierce, low tones, for I will not go until I do. If there was any way I would, he protested. Days Conga would crack my head if I wanted to go against custom. For the love of the light, Fail, just carry the message and I'll wed you the very first day I can. He would, if that day ever came. Suddenly, she was very intent on his beard, smoothing it and not meeting his eyes. She started speaking slowly, but picked up speed like a runaway horse. I just happened to mention, in passing, I just mentioned to Mistress Alvear how we had been traveling together. I don't know how it came up. And she said, and Mistress Conga agreed with her, not that I talk to everybody. She said that we probably, certainly could be considered betrothed already under your customs. And the year is just to make sure you really do get on well together, which we do, as anyone can see. And here I am being as forward as some demonic hussy or one of those tyrant Gauls. If you ever even think of barreling, oh, I'm babbling and you won't even... He cut her off by kissing her as thoroughly as he knew how. Will you marry me? He said breathlessly when he was done. Tonight. Must have done even better with the kiss than he thought. He had to repeat himself 6 times, with her giggling against his throat and demanding he say it again before she seemed to understand. Which was how he found himself not half an hour later, kneeling opposite her in the common room, in front of Daze Conger and Maren Alvear, Osbeth Luhan and Nissa Yellen, and all the women's circle. Loyal had been roused to stand for him, with Aram, and Bane and Chiat stood for Faidal. There were no flowers to put in her hair, or his, but Bane, guided by Maren, tucked a long red wedding ribbon around his neck, and Loyal threaded another through Faidal's dark hair, his thick fingers surprisingly deft and gentle. Maren's hands trembled as he cupped hers. I, Perrin Nebara, do pledge you my love, Faidal Bashir, for as long as I live. As long as I live and act. What I possess in this world, I give to you. A horse, an axe, a bow, a hammer. Not much to give the bride. I give you my life, my love. That's all I have. Will keep and hold you, succor and tend you, protect and shelter you, for all the days of my life. I can't keep you. The only way I can protect you is to send you away. I'm yours. Always and forever. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking visibly. Eel moved her hands to hold his. I, Zareen Bashir. That was a surprise. She hated that name. Pledge you my love, Perrin Nebara. Her hands never trembled at all.
Chapter 54. Into the palace. Seated on the tail end of the high-wheeled cart, trundling up a twisty Tanchican street behind 4 sweating men, Elaine scowled through the grimy veil that covered her from eyes to chin, kicking her bare feet irritably. Every lurch over the paving stones jarred her to the top of her skull. The more she braced herself by holding on to the rough wooden planks of the cart bed, the worse it was. It did not seem to bother Nynaeve much. She jounced about like Elaine, but frowning slightly and eyes looking inward, she appeared hardly aware of it. And Egyanin, crowded against Nynaeve on the other side, veiled and with her dark hair in braids to her shoulders, rode each jolt easily, arms folded. Finally, Elaine emulated the Shan-Chan woman. She could not avoid swaying into Nynaeve, but the ride no longer felt as if her lower teeth were going to be driven through the upper. She would have walked gladly, even barefoot, but Baal Doman had said it would not look right. People might wonder why women were not riding when there was plenty of room, and the last thing they wanted was anyone thinking about them twice. Of course, he was not being bounced about like a sack of turnips. He was walking at the head of the cart with 10 of the 20 sailors he had brought along for escort. More would seem suspicious, he claimed. She suspected he would not have had so many if not for her and the other 2 women. The cloudless sky still stretched gray overhead, though first light had crept on before they set out. The streets were still largely empty and silent except for the rumble of the cart and the creak of its axle. When the sun topped the horizon, people would begin to venture out, but now the few she saw were knots of men in baggy trousers and dark cylindrical caps, scuttling along with the furtive air of having been up to no good, while dark had held. The old piece of canvas tossed over the cart's load was carefully arranged, so anyone could see it covered only 3 large baskets. Yet even so, one or another of those small clusters would pause like a pack of dogs, veiled faces all coming up together, eyes swiveling to follow the cart. Apparently 20 men with boarding swords and cudgels were too many to face, because all eventually hurried on. The wheels dropped into a large hole where paving stones had been pried up in one of the riots. The cart fell away beneath her. She almost bit her tongue as she and the cart bed met again with a hard smack. Egyanin and her casual arm folding. Grabbing the edge of the cart bed, she frowned at the Shan-Chan woman, and found her tight-lipped and holding on with both hands also. Not quite the same as standing on deck after all, Egyanin said with a shrug. Nynaeve grimaced slightly and tried to edge away from the Shan-Chan woman, though how she might manage it without climbing into Elaine's lap was difficult to see. I am going to speak to Master Bail Domon, she muttered meaningfully, just as if the cart had not been her suggestion in the first place. Another lurch clicked her teeth shut. They all three wore drab brown wool, thin woven but coarse and not very clean, poor farm women's dresses like shapeless sacks compared with the clinging silks of Renra's taste. Refugees from the countryside earning a meal as they could. That was what they were supposed to be. Egyanin's relief at her first sight of the dresses had been quite evident, and almost as strange as her presence on the cart. Elaine would not have thought the latter conceivable. There had been quite a lot of discussion, that was what the men called it, in the Chamber of Falling Blossoms, but she and Nynaeve had countered most of their fool objections and ignored the rest. The two of them had to enter the Panarch's palace, and as soon as possible. That was when Domon had raised another objection, one not as silly as the rest. "You can no go into the palace alone," the bearded smuggler muttered, staring at his fists on the table. "You say you will no channel unless you must, no to warn these black eyes to die." Neither of them had seen any need to mention one of the Forsaken. "Then you must have muscle to swing a club if the need do arise, and eyes to watch your backs will no be amiss either. I am known there to the servants. I did take gifts to the old Panarch too. I will go with you." Shaking his head, he growled, "You do make me stretch my neck on the headsman's block because I did leave you at Fauna. Fortune prick me if you do know. Well, it do be done now. You can no object to this. I will go in with you." "You are a fool, Ileana," Juilin said contemptuously, before she or Nynaeve could open their mouths. "You think the Taraboners will allow you to wander about the palace as you wish? A scruffy smuggler from Ilion. I know the ways of servants, how to duck my head and make some empty-headed noble think." He cleared his throat hastily and hurried on without looking at Nynaeve, or at her. "I should be the one to go with them." Tom laughed at the other two men. "Do you think either of you could pass for a Taraboner? I can. These will do in a pinch." He knuckled his long mustaches. "Besides, you cannot run around the Panarch's palace carrying cudgel or staff. A more subtle method of protection is needed." He flourished a hand, and a knife suddenly appeared, spinning through his fingers to vanish just as quickly. Up his sleeve, Elaine believed. "You all know what you have to do," Nynaeve snapped. "And you cannot do it trying to watch over us like a pair of geese for market." Taking a deep breath, she went on in a milder tone. "If there was a way one of you could come along, I'd appreciate the extra eyes if nothing else, but it cannot be. We have to go alone, it seems, and that is all there is to it." "I can accompany you," Egyanin announced suddenly from where Nynaeve had made her stand in the corner of the room. Everybody turned to look at her. She frowned back as though not quite certain herself. "These women are dark friends. They should be brought to justice." Elaine was simply startled at the offer, but Nynaeve, the corners of her mouth going white, looked ready to drub the woman for it. "You think we would trust you, Shan-Chan?" she said coldly. "Before we leave, you'll be locked securely in a storeroom, however much talk it—" "I give my oath, by my hope of a higher name," Egyanin broke in, putting her hands over her heart, one atop the other, "that I will not betray you in any way, that I will obey you and guard your backs until you are safely out of the Panarch's palace." Then she bowed 3 times, deeply and formally. Elaine had no idea what hope of a higher name meant, but the Shan-Chan woman certainly made it sound binding. "He can do it," Domon said with slow reluctance. He eyed Egyanin and shook his head. "Fortune prick me if there be more than 2 or 3 of my men I would wager on, coin for coin, against her." Nynaeve frowned at her hand, gripping 6 of her long braids, then, quite deliberately, gave them a yank. "Nynaeve," Elaine told her firmly, "you yourself said you would like another pair of eyes, and I definitely would. Besides which, if we are to do this without channeling, I would not mind having someone along who can handle a nosy card if need be. I am not up to thumping men with my fists, and neither are you. You remember how she can fight." Nynaeve glared at Egyanin, frowned at Elaine, and then stared at the men, as if they had plotted this behind her back. At last, though, she nodded. "Good," Elaine said. "Master Domon, that means 3 sets of dresses, not 2. Now the 3 of you had best be off. We want to be on our way by daybreak." The cart, jerking to a halt, brought Elaine out of her reverie. Dismounted white cloaks were questioning Domon. Here the street ran into a square behind the Panarch's palace, a much smaller square than the one in front. Beyond, the palace stood in piles of white marble, slender towers banded with lacy stonework, snowy domes capped with gold, and topped by golden spires or weather vanes. The streets to either side were much wider than most in Tanchico, and straighter. Slow clop-clop of a horse's hooves on the square's broad paving stones announced another rider, a tall man in burnished helmet, armor gleaming beneath his white cloak with its golden sunburst and crimson shepherd's crook. Elaine put her head down. The 4 knots of rank under the flaring sun told her this was Jakim Karadin. The man had never seen her, but if he thought she was staring, he might wonder why. The hooves passed on along the square without pausing. Egyanin had her face right down, too, but Nynaeve frowned openly after the Inquisitor. "That man is very worried about something," she murmured. "I hope he's not heard—" "The Panarch is dead," a man's voice shouted from somewhere across the square. "They've killed her." There was no telling who had shouted or where. The streets Elaine could see were blocked by white cloaks on horses. Looking back down the street the cart had just climbed, she wished the guards would question Domon more quickly. People were gathering down at the first bend, milling about and peering up toward the square. It seemed Tom and Jewelin had made a good job of seeding their rumors during the night. Now, if only things did not erupt while they sat out here in the middle of it. If a riot started now. The only thing that kept her hands from shaking was her double grip on the cart bed. Light. A mob out here and the Black Aja inside. Maybe Mogadine. I'm so frightened my mouth is dry. Nynaeve and Elaine were watching the crowd growing down the street, too, and not even blinking, much less trembling. I will not be a coward. I will not. Cart rumbled forward, and she heaved a sigh of relief. It took her a moment to realize she had heard twin echoes from the other 2 women. Before gates not much wider than the cart, Domon was questioned again by men in pointed helmets, their breastplates embossed in 3 painted gold. Soldiers of the Panarch's Legion. The questions were shorter this time. Elaine thought she saw a small person, and then they were inside, rumbling across the rough-paved yard outside the kitchens. Except for Domon, the sailors remained out with the soldiers. Elaine hopped down as soon as the cart halted, working her bare feet on the paving. The uneven stones were hard. It was difficult to believe the thin sole of a slipper could make so much difference. Egyanin scrambled up into the cart to pass the baskets out, Nynaeve taking the first on her back, one hand twisted behind her underneath, the other over her shoulder to grip the rim. Long white peppers, a little wizened by their journey all the way from Saldaia, filled the baskets nearly to the top. As Elaine was taking hers, Domon came to the end of the cart and pretended to inspect the ice peppers. "The White Cloaks and the Panarch's Legion do be close to blows, it do appear," he murmured, fingering peppers. "That lieutenant did say the Legion could protect the Panarch themselves if most of the Legion had no been sent to the Rings forts. Jake and Caradin do have access to the Panarch, but no the Lord Captain of the Legion, and they are no pleased that all the guards inside do be civil watch. A suspicious man might say someone do want the Panarch's guards to watch each other more than anything else." "That is good to know," Nynaeve murmured without looking at him. "I've always said you can learn useful things listening to men's gossip." Domon grunted sourly. "I will take you inside. Then I must go back to my men to make sure they do no get caught up in the mob." Every sailor from every ship Domon had in port was out in the streets around the palace. Hefting her own basket on her back, Elaine followed the other two women behind him, keeping her head down and wincing at every step, until she was on the reddish-brown tiles of the kitchen. The smells of spices and cooking meat and sauces filled the room. "Ice peppers for the Panarch," Domon announced. "A gift from Bail Domon, a good ship-owner of this city." "More of the ice peppers?" a stout, dark-braided woman in a white apron and the ever-present veil said, barely looking up from a silver tray, where she was arranging an ornately folded white napkin among dishes of thin, golden sea-folk porcelain. There were a dozen or more aproned women in the kitchen, as well as a pair of boys turning dripping roasts on spits in 2 of the 6 fireplaces, but clearly she was the chief cook. "Well, the Panarch, she seems to have enjoyed the last. Into the storeroom there." She gestured vaguely toward one of the doors on the far side of the room. "I have no time to bother with you now." Elaine kept her eyes on the floor as she trailed after Nynaeve and Egyanin, sweating, and not for the heat of the iron stoves and fireplaces. A skinny woman in green silk, not of Tarabon cut, stood beside one of the wide tables, scratching the ears of a scrawny gray cat as it lapped cream from a porcelain dish. The cat named her, as well as her narrow face and wide nose. Marilyn Gamulfin, once of the brown Aja, now of the black. If she looked up from that cat, if she really became aware of them, there would be no need for channeling for her to know that 2 of them could. This close, the woman would be able to sense the ability itself. Sweat dripped from the end of Elaine's nose by the time she pushed the storeroom door shut behind her with a hip. "Did you see her?" she demanded in a low voice, letting her basket half fall to the floor. Fretwork carved through the plastered wall just under the ceiling let in dim light from the kitchen. Rows of tall shelves filled the floor of the large room, laden with sacks and net bags of vegetables and large jars of spice. Barrels and casks stood everywhere, and a dozen dressed lambs and twice as many geese hung on hooks. According to the sketchy floor plan Domon and Tom had drawn between them, this was the smallest storeroom for food in the palace. "This is disgusting," she said. "I know Rendra keeps a full kitchen, but at least she buys what she needs as she can. These people have been feasting while—" "Hold your concern until you can do something about it," Nynaeve told her in a sharp whisper. She had upended her basket on the floor and was stripping off her rough farm woman's dress. Egyanin was already down to her shift. "I did see her. If you wanted to come in here to see what the noise is about, keep talking." Elaine sniffed, but let it pass. She had not been making that much noise. Pulling off her own dress, she dumped the peppers out of her basket and what had been hidden under them as well. Among other things, a dress of white belted in green, fine-spun wool embroidered above the left breast with a green tree of spreading branches atop the outline of a trefoil leaf. Her grimy veil was replaced by a clean one, of linen scraped nearly as sheer as silk. White slippers with padded soles were welcome on feet bruised by that walk from cart to kitchen. Shan woman had been the first out of her old clothes, but she was the last into her white garment, muttering all the while about indecent and serving girl, which made no sense. The dresses were servants' dresses. The whole point was that servants could go anywhere, and a palace had too many for anyone to notice 3 more. And as for indecent, Elaine could remember being a touch hesitant about wearing the Tarabon style in public, but she had become used to it soon enough, and even this thin wool could not cling as silk did. Egyanin seemed to have very strict ideas of modesty. Eventually, though, the woman had done up her last lace, and the farm clothes had been stuffed into the baskets and covered with ice peppers. Marilyn Gamulfin was gone from the kitchen, though the raggedy-eared gray cat still lapped cream on the table. Elaine and the other 2 started for the door that led deeper into the palace. One of the undercooks was frowning at the cat, fist on her ample hips. "I would like to strangle this cat," she muttered, pale brown braids swinging as she shook her head angrily. "It eats the cream, and because I put the drop of cream on the berries for my breakfast, I have the bread and water for my meals. Count yourself lucky you are not out in the street or swinging from the gallows." The chief cook did not sound sympathetic. "If a lady says you have stolen, then you have stolen, even if it is the cream for her cats, yes? You, there!" Elaine and her companions froze at the shout. The dark-braided woman shook a long wooden spoon at them. "You come into my kitchen and stroll about as in the garden, you lazy sows, you! You have come for the breakfast of the Lady Ispan, yes? If you do not have it there when she wakes, you will learn how to jump. Well?" She gestured at the silver tray she had been laboring over before, covered now with a snowy linen cloth. There was no way to speak. If any one of them opened her mouth, her first words would show her no Tarabonner. Thinking quickly, Elaine bobbed a servant's curtsy and picked up the tray. A servant carrying something was going about her work, and not likely to be stopped or told to do something else. Lady Ispan? Not an uncommon name in Tarabon, but there was an Ispan on the list of Black Sisters. "So you mock me, do you, you little cow, you?" the stout woman roared, and started around the table, waving her thick wooden spoon threateningly. There was nothing to do without giving herself away, nothing but stay and be hit, or run. Elaine darted out of the kitchen with the tray, Nynaeve and Egyanin at her heels. The cook's shouts followed them, but not the cook, thankfully. An image of the 3 of them running through the palace, pursued by the stout woman, made Elaine want to giggle hysterically. Mock her? She was sure that had been exactly the same curtsy servants had given her thousands of times. 4 storerooms lined the narrow hallway leading away from the
calm
kitchen,
down.
and
I know,
cupboards
I know.
with brooms and
I'm getting
buckets
there.
and soaps,
We're about to go to
linens for
bed,
tables,
okay?
and all sorts of assorted things. Nynaeve found a fat feather duster in one. Egyanin
I know,
took
I
an
know,
armful
I
of
know.
folded towels from another, and a stout stone pestle out of a mortar in a third.
Alright,
She hid
everyone.
the pestle
I'm gonna
under the
call
towels.
into this live for tonight.
Cudgel is
I want to
sometimes
thank
how it
everyone
is,
for
she
stopping
said,
by, and
when
everyone
Elaine
keep
raised
stopping
an
by.
eyebrow. Especially when
Until
no
next
one
time, everyone.
expects
Y'all
you to
stay
happen.
safe out there.
Nynaeve sniffed but said nothing. She had hardly acknowledged Egyanin at all since agreeing to her presence. Deeper in the palace, the hallways broadened and heightened.
I know,
The white
buddy.
walls carved with friezes and the ceilings set with gleaming arabesques of gold. Long, bright carpets ran along white-tiled floors. Ornate golden lamps on gilded stands gave light and the scent of perfumed oil. Sometimes the corridor opened into courtyards rounded by walks with slim, fluted columns, overlooked by balconies screened by filigreed stonework.